I'm David Guile. I'm from the Institute of Education, and I'm the co-director of the Centre for Engineering Education. Paul Greening, my colleague who's sitting here, is another director, and Paul's from the Faculty of Engineering. And so the idea of the Centre for Engineering and Education was to bring together engineering expertise and education expertise and to blend them, hopefully in a very purposeful way, so that we could both respond to but also identify the kinds of challenges that engineering in its broadest sense, whether it be biomedical, whether it be electrical, construction, etc., right across the spectrum of all the engineering specialisms, are addressing or may have to be addressing over the next few years. And clearly, one of those issues is always going to be about workforce development in some kind of way, whether it be the existing workforce or whether it be the workforce of the future. So we chose as the opening theme issue for this first conversations series the issue of apprenticeships. So the we is not just Paul and I. We have an advisory body, an advisory group that consists of a range of people from different backgrounds. Some of them come from engineering, some of them come from the world of policy, some of them come from other parts of the educational landscape and so forth that are concerned with engineering. And we discussed this some time back under our chairmanship of Matthew Harrison over here, and felt that the idea of, or sorry, the topic or the concept of apprenticeship was extremely important, not just because there's a lot of traction within central government at this point in time around apprenticeship, but in a sense, going back in time, engineering has always had a long and very rich and successful history of having apprenticeship, and it's retained that throughout periods when other sectors actually lost interest and detached themselves. So you actually have a much richer and more extended history to draw upon than many other occupational areas in the United Kingdom. But of course, as with all issues, they get recast over time. To some extent they get recast because the policy climate changes. Also they get recast because, no doubt we're going to hear this evening, what happens is that within companies, the nature of work changes, and therefore the nature of what an apprentice should be doing and how they should be doing it changes over time. So, having said that to begin with, I'm going to try and do this. We think, in the centre, we're in a uniquely strong position to actually bring all kinds of people, no matter what background they come from, together to discuss the kind of issues like apprenticeship and others that we're going to try and agendarise over from now into, well, I suppose when I retire, which I haven't actually got a date for that, so it's a long time in the future. What we're trying to do, which is why you're going to discover in a moment, we're going to run this as a slightly different type of event from the one that you might have expected to come to this evening. We are wanting to create a dialogue, as it says there, between stakeholders about issues central to the future of engineering, opportunities to identify concrete ways to follow them up, and also the use of social media to actually communicate on what we're doing. So we're not going in a passive mode and waiting for the research report to be launched before we actually start talking to wider communities. We want to do that. We use social media to kind of get the message out there. Hopefully you also will respond in different kinds of ways, and what we'll actually manage to do is mobilise more and more people into a conversation around some of the issues that arise from Graham and Lorna, who I'll introduce formally in a moment to you, this conversation this evening. Now, the nature of the conversation is not therefore that Lorna and Graham are going to give inputs and then you're going to ask them questions which one or the other will respond to. Okay? We're going to completely change the culture, the expectations, right? And you're therefore active contributors in making this change process. The idea of a conversation is that actually when Lorna or Graham, whoever that starts first, I haven't actually quite asked them which way around they're going to go, but when they've actually kind of had their introductory comments, it's open to the floor. And what I'll be looking to do is actually bring people up, bring people into the conversation so they link in. So it could be you're talking across one another as much as talking to Graham and Lorna. So the idea is it spreads around the room rather than being two experts who are actually parrying questions and playing back answers. Of course they'll want to contribute as well. We also do want you to kind of help us maybe take the conversation somewhere different possibly from where Graham and Lorna have actually initially located its kind of core themes and core issues. So I think on that note I'm going to do the formal introductions and I'm but I first of all have to turn this off because we've discovered when we're doing our rehearsals that it's impossible for Lorna and Graham to talk with that sharp light on their face. It's easier for me, I'm only up here for 3 minutes, or whatever. So, I think we're extremely privileged this evening to have two people who had an incredibly extensive history of involvement with the apprenticeship. Lorna Unwin, now Professor Emeritus at the UCL IOE, I have to keep on saying that because I'm so used to saying over the years the IOE, I forget to preface it with the UCL IOE, has written about apprenticeship with Alison Fuller, who's here as well, many of you will know, and Lorna has her inaugural lecture shown, for those of you who were there to see it, when she kind of reminded us about how life used to be many decades back and the role of apprenticeship in communities at that point in time, has always had this passionate kind of concern for how you recast apprenticeship to address and respond to changing conditions. And I'm sure she's both going to be doing that and also kind of developing themes around that in the course of what she says this evening. Graham Schuhmacher, many of you may well know from his time at Rolls-Royce, where you were head of learning and development, yes, and in charge of apprenticeship in one of the most prestigious and one of the UK companies that have also has had a fantastic history in supporting apprenticeship, and so that it's become a flagship. Governments and successive governments have looked at how Rolls-Royce have offered apprenticeship, and as Graham no doubt will say, Rolls-Royce working overseas has also then talked to other countries about its model of apprenticeship and its development. So hopefully I've said enough to actually set the scene for the two of you. Who's starting? Graham, okay, fine. So
the engineers.
The engineer is starting, right? This is as it should be, okay? And the educationist is responding, okay? Right, okay. I shall sit down and pop back slightly later just to kind of orchestrate things rather than anything else. Right, Graham, over to you.
Thank you. I think I was one of the apprentices Lorna was probably talking about in her lecture. I was an apprentice back 40 odd years ago, sometime in the 70s, which many can't remember. So I started as an apprenticeship and spent 43 years in Rolls-Royce, and also spent time working on the framework committee with Centre, various other policy things in the UK on apprenticeships. But I had apprentices in Germany and Norway, and I do get very frustrated when people tell me that we ought to do it like the Germans, or we ought to do it like everybody else. I know which apprentices I was most proud of, and they weren't in Germany or Norway or Sweden, they were in the UK. So it could be like that for us. So I left Rolls-Royce earlier this year, and I do some work now on and off on skills and apprenticeship. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've been very, very optimistic about the future of manufacturing, which is broadly what I'll focus on tonight for the UK. Been optimistic because of technology, automation, technology that could allow us to onshore a good deal of work into the UK. Could. I've become quite pessimistic with our ability, both at government level, managing the skills system, and at company level, just pessimistic about the get up and go to develop skills to enable that work to come back on shore. And I think I flirt between the two. There are areas of optimism, and then I have the odd day where it's like, when I hear about the levy for apprenticeships and think, is that a well thought through policy that's going to enable more high skills training to take place, or might it have some not quite predictable consequences? Area reviews of further education colleges. Is that really what we should be doing when we're trying to grow high skills, to get automation? And automation in manufacturing, I'm not just talking about engineering, I'm talking about food. I've been really surprised how much food manufacturing there is that uses the same skills as engineering, the medical sector, a whole series of things. I was even amused that the BBC did a week on automation, and they wandered into artificial intelligence to replace lawyers on contract reading. A farm that's run by a dairy farm that's run by one person, a number of robots that the cows go and get milked when they're ready to be milked. All this automation that needs high skills to plan a system, to manage the system, to maintain the system. That systems thinking, that high skill that is required to do that, we are desperately short of in the UK. So the skills system, to me, is really, really important that we get the whole thing joined up. From technical schools, I'm chairing a UTC in Derby. We opened about 3 weeks ago. We've got 180 young people joined us at 14 and 16. 180 was planned, we've got 180 started. And they're really keen to work with the companies in the Derby area because they can see those skilled jobs. Their parents can see those jobs. So that's one of my optimistic moments. And I can see a pathway through for those young people that go to the college, go to the university, go to Sheffield for manufacturing, could go to Warwick for manufacturing engineering, Nottingham for supply chain. So there's a whole series of pathways they can take, and companies that really want to work with them. So that's an optimistic moment. And then I listened to somebody from BIS talking about area reviews and or national colleges, or technical institutions, or we got the time to do all of that at the time when we should be winning these orders from overseas. Optimism, pessimistic. I think I'm having them in the same days now, from what I hear. I'm probably more interested in manufacturing because I come from the Midlands, and about 12% of our company's manufacturing there. We have Toyota, who's a big partner of my UTC, who have a engine manufacturing plant in Deeside, who make engines, not just for the UK, but they send them back to Japan, they send them to South Africa, Brazil, and it's a sort of factory which is automated, has high-skilled systems engineers at level 7, level 6, 5, 4, and a few at level 3 operate. So we have got companies doing this, but there's so much more we could be doing. Where apprenticeships come into it is to develop those roles at level 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got the apprenticeship suite in place, not widely recruited, but we have got, so if I go back to Rolls-Royce, I've got an apprentice who's going to be placed. I had an apprentice, I can't quite let go. I had an apprentice who's going to be placed as a manager this year. He left school, joined us at 16. He will finish his master's degree next year and will be placed as a manager this year, running a manufacturing part of our business. He's gone to university, he's got a really good higher education as well as the skills to do that. More importantly than anything, he's got the workplace behaviours. He knows how to manage people, how we do things, and he completely sees that whole picture. So here's that young man, and we have lots of young ladies actually that going into those management roles where we've been successful getting girls into those apprenticeships. They go through and are really successful, both in engineering, supply chain planning, control, purchasing, manufacturing. They are really driven. So what we've got is those workplace behaviours supporting the skill and the higher education. Doesn't mean to say we don't need people from university. We still need deep thinkers around this. So we still recruit from Cambridge and Rolls-Royce and Toyota and all the other companies for some real professional engineers. But we then train them in the workplace behaviours and the skills when we get into companies. So we've got we've got the means to do this. It's whether we've got the drive. And I am talking about companies as well as government drive to make the systems work. So I think the focus of the government should be on how do we encourage the 90% of the companies who don't train, how do we get them engaged? How do we give them the tools to access the skill system to make it easy for them? I don't think levying them, punishing them, right, is quite what I mean about encouraging companies to train more apprenticeships. So I really wish we'd got a minister that was passionate about the system as a whole rather than focused on cost saving or playing around with parts of the system. I did have quite a lot of time for Matt Hancock, and I know that's not a popular view, but at least he tried to understand the whole system. The current minister, I'm not entirely sure does. The worrying thing is if you look forward into the next 10 years, baby boomers like me probably aren't going to work until they're 65 or 70. They are probably going to start finishing at 60 and doing bits of weeks. And that could create a massive gap in that skills group we've got today getting us by. So we could have between 5 and 10 million jobs to replace in the next 10 years. We've probably not many of those baby boomers working on later in life. So that means we've got to do something else. So we've got some unemployed. That means we have to do something to reskill them. Probably means a significant amount of reskilling of the workforce that we have in place today. It probably means doing something on immigration as well. If a politician can ever get around to saying that to anybody without losing an election. But somewhere, if we're not going to carry on shrinking in the manufacturing sector, we've got to do something. And I don't think, in my pessimistic moods, I can see what that's going to be. In my optimistic moods, I can see more companies doing what Toyota do, doing what Rolls-Royce does. And even Rolls-Royce has as much activity overseas as it has in the UK, because some governments are really quite keen to help encourage them to go and work in Singapore or Germany or other parts of the world. I think the UTC model and the technical schools is where I see the skill system starting. And there are some problems with some UTCs, but I still think that's a good start. Starting at 14 and getting these young people engaged in what the roles might be, getting them visiting companies, getting them enthused, seeing where they might have an income for life is part of that skill system, through to a clear route from school, college, university, a career, retraining, a mapped out roadmap, a map showing how you might develop through a whole career and what your earnings potential might be. I've got school teachers in Derby that I'm not very happy that I'm recruiting some of their good students into my UTC. Their view is schools aren't there to produce factory fodder. My view is our UTC is there to give them an income for life. And if that's working in engineering and manufacturing that's given me a great life, I'd be happy with that. But we've got to do so much more to make the whole of the manufacturing area work for the UK, because there's plenty of work that can come back to this country that can make that bit work.
Right, hello everybody. Where to begin? I thought I would begin with a book that I had the pleasure of looking at recently, which is in the Museum of Commerce and Technology in Manchester. the museum in Manchester has a fantastic archive of some of the big engineering companies in Manchester, Ferranti, Metropolitan Vickers, a number of others. And it's taken in those archives into the museum, and at the moment, because I'm involved in writing, trying to write a history of technical education in England, I'm having the pleasure of looking at these archives. And one of the things I came across in the Metropolitan Vickers archive was a book published in 1957, and it's a beautiful brown leather volume with gold writing on the front. And when you open the book, it's the names of 30,000 apprentices who were trained at Metropolitan Vickers between 1910 and 1957, including some members of my own family. And the book is just a series of little snapshots. It gives the name, date of birth, often the place, their original address in Manchester and surrounding areas of Lancashire. It gives you the name of the apprenticeship that they did, how long it was, and then it gives you a little potted occupational history. So it tells you whether they stayed at Metropolitan Vickers, and obviously quite a lot did, or whether they went to another company. It will tell you if they went on and did further qualifications, including some of them who went on and did degrees, etc. 30,000 snapshots. It's a joy to look at, because it's obviously a snapshot, it's a social history, as much as a history of training, proper training. So when I look at that, and you think, okay, is that what ministers think is still happening? You know, this golden age of thousands of people coming through a proper, what Alison Fuller and I often, when we have our conversations, we have this shorthand of proper apprenticeships. Because then I draw your attention to something rather different. If you go on the apprenticeships.org.uk website, which if you were one of Graham's pupils in the UTC, or if you were an 18-year-old with A-levels wanting to find an apprenticeship, this is the site that you go to, and gives you some options to put in keywords and so on to see what apprenticeship vacancies there are throughout England. And it's a very, very glossy site. So if you, as I did a couple of days ago, if you put in engineering into the keyword search, and it then asks you to either put in a postcode or a town or a city or whatever, and you can put in the name, and you can say within 5 miles of that place, 20 miles, 40 miles. So I put in Sheffield, within 20 miles of Sheffield, what engineering apprenticeship vacancies are there? And there are 37 within 20 miles of Sheffield. So you think, is that good? Is that pathetic? Well, you know, it's quite hard to kind of get a sense of whether it should be 370. You know, what does that mean? And then you look at what those vacancies actually consist of, and out of the 37 vacancies, when you dig, because what you do then is you can click on the vacancy and it tells you what the company is and what the apprenticeship is about. And so in Sheffield, what you find is that of those 37, 19 are at level 2. 8 are what Alison and I would call proper level 3. So that's your advanced apprenticeship, the type that Rolls-Royce offers. There are 2 higher apprenticeships, and then there is a sewing machinist. This is under engineering. There are 3 business admin apprenticeships, and there is this apprenticeship. IT apprenticeship, support engineer. So you think, right, you know, that's an engineering apprenticeship. We're looking for an enthusiastic and outgoing individual who loves dealing with people and aspires to provide the best levels of customer service. So my antennae and alarm bells start ringing when you read customer service. You will be providing telephone, email and remote support for our IT solutions being used by customers throughout the UK. So you think, okay, I'm on the end of the telephone or I'm sending emails. So what's this apprenticeship? Well, the apprenticeship's going to take you 13 months. It's advanced level, so it's level 3. Qualifications required, no formal qualifications required to apply for this. Most of the proper ones are asking for at least 5 GCSEs, A star to C, with maths and English absolutely at A star to C, but not this one. So then you read, this apprenticeship is delivered remotely via a virtual classroom. You will be enrolled onto the award-winning Microsoft apprenticeship programme and work towards gaining MTA server fundamentals. Not quite sure what that is. Also a City and Guilds ICT level 3 diploma. Okay? So, without wanting to cause David problems with the libel laws, I'm speaking so it's slander, that might be a lot better than I'm portraying it. My point is, behind the smoke and mirrors of all the hoo-ha, the brouhaha that ministers engage in over successive governments, so this is it's not a party political point, it's been going on for years, over all the brouhaha about 3 million apprenticeships being the target. If you look behind, look at the reality, then it's a very, very troubling picture for engineering. That's before we get on to a whole host of other sectors. So if Graham, I think, is powerfully arguing that there is big potential for a lot of manufacturing jobs to be grown because there's a potential for more onshoring to take place, more work coming back into this country, more skilled work, then I think we have an issue which is a historic issue in this country, which is, do we really take seriously what we mean by skills in this country and how they're developed and used? Because I think when you look at what's on the apprenticeship website and you do the kind of research that Alison and I and some colleagues here in this room have done over the years, and you actually go into workplaces and look at what's happening, then I think we can't go on for much longer pretending that everything is okay, because I don't see many real signs that, and I thought Graham made a very interesting point about what Rolls-Royce and other companies like Rolls-Royce need are people who can think about the whole system. If you're making an aeroplane, you need people who can think about the whole system. And having talked to the apprentices Graham used to be in charge of and see how they're trained, they are trained, and this is the, whether they're the 16-year-olds, whether they're the older ones on higher apprenticeship, whether in fact they're the graduate trainees that Rolls-Royce has, they are actively engaged in thinking about the whole system, not just the bit that they're going to be specifically working on. So I think, for me, the joined up bit there is for policymakers, I use that term quite broadly, to take a whole system approach. Because at the moment, I think we have a very disjointed approach to skills policy and also to education policy, which in a way is going backwards in the sense that we have now an even more polarised education policy, I think. So if it was possible for the development of, if it was possible for policy to model the way in which aeroplanes are made, if you go into the aerospace plant in Derby and you look at how they actually make an aeroplane or an engine, if you look at the whole systems approach to that and you analyse it, you will have a fantastic route map for what the educational system might look like to get you to that point. And I think we are a long, long way from that. Not just in terms of the problem with apprenticeships, but I think also, which I think needs throwing into this mix, is full-time further education programmes. And I know Matthew Harrison did some really interesting work a little while ago looking at the state of full-time engineering courses in FE and just how many were at level 2 and below. So to actually deliver those level 3, 4, 5 skills that we need now, but which also would enable us to bring back some of that manufacturing and grow some of what we've already got. I do think we have a real problem that we can't go on not taking seriously. I think I would just end by saying that the other worrying aspect when you look at that apprenticeship vacancy site, when you look at the descriptions of the apprenticeships on offer, they are written in very reductionist terms, a lot of them. So you don't get a sense from those descriptions, and again, drawing on work that Alison and I did for Gatsby, for the Gatsby Foundation, on the relationship between apprenticeship and occupation. When you look at the descriptions on the apprenticeship vacancy site, some of the proper engineering apprenticeships, give you a sense, give the young person who's reading that vacancy a sense that they are going to be joining an occupational field that has all sorts of pathways within it, all sorts of riches for them to engage with. Sadly, most of the ones I looked at, and this was for the ones within 20 miles radius of Sheffield, were much more about you will be answering the telephone, you will be, you know, learning some basic routine stuff. They were very, very job specific in a way that was almost like a job advert for an advert for somebody starting a job, not a journey towards becoming an expert within an occupational community. So I would end by saying, what on earth are the engineering companies doing about this? When did the head of Rolls-Royce appear on Newsnight or the Today programme banging the table about this? Because I haven't heard them shout. What are the engineering professional associations doing about it? What is the Centre for Education and Engineering going to do about it?
A neat controversial point to end on. Right, okay. So, as I said, it's a conversation, so perhaps someone would like to initiate a conversation from the floor. Yes, please do.
Okay. My question, when I look at the history of it is quite clear that apprenticeships, okay, they've gone down drastically. But the question I have is it going down of apprenticeship due to neglect at probably national level, or is it just obeying the economic consequences? Because I remember reading early on future careers and for engineers in this country, in Europe, in the UK, in the United States, saying the skilling level is more towards those high-end precision skills or advanced skills, probably taking place in and around Cambridge area. So the question is, when you look at today's campaign and we talk of apprenticeship, is it sufficient to talk of apprenticeships with probably including just the borderline of the UK, or companies have spread out such that where they need apprentices, probably in places like China, and here probably the job is more for those advanced skills, where probably level 3, 4, 5 would be perhaps insufficient to drive the economy.
I'd like to pick up the thread. Yeah.
What your question made me think is this just a problem of labelling? So if I think of my company, we have skills, if we don't get the skilled people, we're out of business, so we take it really, really seriously, and we have our own internal systems of training people, finding them and developing them in our company. And all engineering companies do this. Some choose to put a big A apprenticeship to describe what they're doing, some choose to put a small A apprenticeship, and some just choose to do their own thing, and they form an alliance with a local school, a local college, they help to shape the curriculum, and they bring folks through. So sometimes when I'm feeling pessimistic, I wish that government would get out of apprenticeship, because then actually maybe we'd have a more honest product.
Yeah.
Can I pick up that with a kind of link to the skill system that Lorna spoke about? I'm principal of Prospects College of Advanced Technology, with the first new specialist college since 1992. And that might tell you something actually about the skills system. We, by the way, banned two things. One is any apprenticeships at level 2. We only start at level 3. And the other thing we've banned is the V word, vocational, because actually our view is that this country has become polarised into a debate about academic or vocational, the implication being that vocational is in some way for those who are not academic. And it's a nonsense argument because you need both vocational, academic, technical, professional skills to be successful in whatever career you're doing. But my sort of proposition is that if we've got a skills system, it's a skills system that's bust and has been for a very long time. And my evidence for that is when you look at the statistics, 4.1 million people in further education, 500,000 on apprenticeships, 400,000 in sixth forms, and yet many sectors, aerospace, the rail industry, reporting acute shortages in skills in those sectors, such that they are becoming uncompetitive with our European competitors. And in fact, if you looked at productivity and its relationship to skills, 30% less productive in the UK than France, Germany, or the United States. So my proposition is the skills system is bust. We've devalued apprenticeships, we've undervalued and underinvested in technical professional education, and we're reaping the rewards of that now. And we don't need something that's tinkering, we need a major new movement to rebuild the skills infrastructure, refocus our FE sector to where the jobs are, so that we can actually train the people and create that pipeline that UK industry is going to need to be productive.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the point you was making about why's the numbers come down, I do think there's been something in the last 20 years where companies have found it quite easy to send work overseas and buy low-cost manufacturing. And they've got out of the habit of training. And they hide a little bit behind the system's complicated, but they've got it out of the habit because they can find capacity overseas. Now it's coming back to the opportunity to reinvest it and bring that work back in. They're finding the whole thing, they forgot how to use the system, bust or not, they forgot how to do that. They're out of the habit of training, they don't know how to engage with schools. Schools don't want them engaging with them, so that I think it's beyond the skill system that's bust. The whole system, actually company thinking as well as the skill system's bust.
I think so there's also an element in there of we've been rewarding the vocational education system structure for meeting the needs of individuals, and individuals, because they haven't been given sound advice and guidance, have been pitching it wanting to do fluffy animals and things that actually aren't going to be of great interest to engineers, rather than the potential jobs. So there's a mismatch. We've been judged to be successful for meeting the needs of the individual who's expressed a need that doesn't relate to an economic imperative. But then expecting that whole system to flip itself over and seeing it as being unsuccessful because it's no longer doing things that's entirely different from the thing you wanted it to do in the first place. So it's sort of saying, well, give it a bit of time and have some conversations rather than let's wipe all that out, nuke it all and just bring IoTs, UTCs, any other new little acronym we can think of to bring in to make it look sexy, new and brilliant. But actually establishing some more, and I agree, there's an element within, I represent colleges, so hence my view. There's an element of, it would be great if government would move out of it and allow us to have a lot more close conversations with employers, but it would be also much more helpful if employers all said a fairly similar thing. Because, again, it's lovely, and those high-level skills are great, but if there's only 10-year, with the best in the world, with the level of investment that there is at the moment, even if you've got that stuff, that's not enough to run or sustain, particularly specialist college, that's not enough to run and sustain. So if you're only doing the higher end, I don't see how that's a sustainable model just on a purely economic basis.
Yeah. I think, Graham, when you talked about the teachers who were worried about your UTC and factory fire, I think is the principal answer. We're in the Institute of Education, the education system, and I'm talking about school, and the educationalists are the main cause of not preparing people for the idea that everyone works in the end on some sort of intellectual thing. It's all about learning. Now, you can have both, and part of the reason Neil's skill system is broke is the bit before. the lack of even wanting to talk about it. So the fact that in 2015 you can have teachers talking about factory fodder is, I have to say, at the foot of the education system. That is the biggest problem we encounter all the time.
Absolutely.
And that you really should take that on board, because it's great that you are joining up apprenticeships with the Institute of Education and learning and teaching teachers and so on, but and it is very good. We've been trying to do that for a very long time, and it's quite difficult dealing with DFE over the years. Didn't even want to talk about apprenticeships. We're all used to it now, but they didn't want to talk about it at all.
I would like to suggest that perhaps we're coming at this from the wrong direction. It's not a supply side problem, it's a demand side problem. Your 30,000 apprentices in this roll of honour before the war, how many, how many of those would it take to produce now what they produced then? Now, we can't provide employment for all of them. And what we should be looking for is, I suggest, educating for leisure. A little bit like Bertrand Russell, who wrote an essay called In Praise of Idleness, and Brian Redhead, of long gone. Many of his discussions were on how do we educate people, how do we create a society in which people are doing nothing? Because if we are actually wanting to automate our systems, we're going to provide work for less and less people. And I think we're in danger of delivering a lot of silicon shipminders' mates who are not doing real work. They're just checking somebody else's work using the approach that engineers used 30 to 40 years ago, when you had manual processes that had to be checked and reviewed and checked again. We should be looking to how we can reduce the work that people do and how we can actually create a society in which people are actually doing less work. Now, that's quite radical. That's not the topic of what we're talking about now, but that's been my impression over the years as indeed a civil engineer.
There's somebody wants to come in. I think we may come back to that because at the moment. I'll just say that I went to an event at the IPPR last week where somebody was launching a book called The Rise of the Robots, and it's effectively your argument. So I think there is something that needs to be taken account of. But the gentleman at the back, sorry, you were next to come in, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking of Graham's point, Phil Williams, by the way, from CEE, but I'm also a trustee of the Design and Technology Association, which is really more this point. Flipping between optimism and pessimism and thinking about the last 10 minutes, we might leave here suicidal, so I'll contribute my own to that, please. I was with a young apprentice with a advanced engineering company that most people would know. Last week I had lunch with her. She's 16, got great qualifications coming out of school and started on this apprenticeship program. And she was telling me that at the age of 15 there was a gifted and talented group at her school. Her school is in the vicinity of this, it's not Rolls-Royce, by the way, but in the vicinity of this prolific manufacturer. And when she told the teacher that she wanted to do an apprenticeship and not go to university, she was asked to leave the gifted and talented group, because the gifted and talented group was to get people ready to go to higher education. 16. My daughter is she was 9 when she said last Christmas at the school play she wanted to be in the technical team and do the sound system, and she was told that she couldn't because she was a boy. So I think that the supply side, I think it's a very interesting point on the demand side, but on the supply side, when I joined the Board of Data, which is in the last 12 months, I was genuinely gobsmacked at the issue facing the design and technology qualification, in that the shortages of young people coming in, or teachers coming in to take up and become design and technology teachers, are only matched, and we can come on to this later, by the work that Matthew did around the industry shortfall of companies needing apprentices. So I think there is a big thing about actually, it's one thing saying employers should be looking out for apprentices, and I, with all due respect, Graham, I think a Rolls-Royce apprenticeship is very different to BWJ Engineering in Ilford, which is a fictitious company. But we work with a lot of SMEs, and one of their biggest challenges, not just onto apprenticeship programs, we're working with engineering companies who can't recruit receptionists because young people coming out of school don't want to work in engineering and manufacturing, don't want to work in the sector. The last time it was 20% of GDP was 1979, when Margaret Thatcher came to power. That's not a political statement. The point is, there's generations of parents and generations of teachers have missed what's going on. And the point about jobs in demand, I think, you know, the role of technology has always been forecasted to bring the end to jobs, and never has. There's loads of jobs, and you know, build them and build the apprentices, and those jobs will come. That will be where I put my money. So I think that's a blunt answer, and I absolutely respect the point that's made about trying to tease out more evidence of the demand. But if I had a quid, I'd rather put it into getting people ready for those jobs and say, well, they're not going to be here, so let's not bother. So there's an awful lot of things, but the biggest one for me is Design and Technology Association are running a campaign to try to influence policy to say, you know, if you're offering £20,000 bursaries for maths teachers, can we do something similar for design and technology teachers, because there's a dire shortage. And if the government is serious about fixing the flow of people wanting to come into engineering and manufacturing, then it has to do something about it. And it starts with more and more design and technology. Well, one of the solutions is more and more design and technology teachers. So I would agree with the point.
Okay. John? I just wanted to pursue the point about demand, really. I don't think there's a problem with demand if you're Rolls-Royce or if you're British Aerospace or if you're Steamer. And you do what is good for you, and you do probably a bit more than that as well. The problem in demand is all the other people. I mean, as you were saying, there's almost no demand at all. And you can't actually build the apprenticeships as that can come, because apprenticeships inherently involve actually working. And if there isn't work that people can do, you can't build an apprenticeship. I mean, there have been numerous attempts over the years. I mean, I've been involved in apprenticeships since the 1960s. And the only person I know who was involved in apprenticeships was before the Industrial Training Act in 1964, I think. There have been loads of attempts over the years to engage employers in some way to stimulate demand for apprenticeships. And I have to say, none of them has worked. None of them over that period. I mean, some of them I've been personally involved in, and they haven't worked either. So I think that there's a real issue there about how you stimulate demand. And there's a cultural thing, apart from anything else. I mean, part of the history that Lorna was referring to reflects a time when apprenticeship occupied a place in the culture. And now it doesn't. The term has got devalued. It's got devalued because it's been taken down to level 2, which I think was the most disastrous thing that the government ever did in terms of apprenticeship. It's getting even further devalued by the current reforms to apprenticeship, which mean that you don't even have to have a proper qualification if you do an apprenticeship. Okay, you will if you go to Rolls-Royce, but there's lots of places now you'll be able to go and you come out of it with nothing, except a note from your employer saying you've done your time there, which is going back a long way before 1957. And the killer blow, really, is Mr. Cameron's 3 million target. I believe there are people already at work in BIS determining what will be counted as apprentice equivalents, so that Mr. Cameron can be able to claim that he's made his target. What have we come to when apprenticeships are being talked about in those terms?
So, can I just respond to that? I absolutely think that's the point. You know, we may have tried many times. I've worked with our supply chain trying to get them, and it's really, really hard. But I deeply, and this is my deeply pessimistic mood, believe that if we don't do it now, those companies will shrivel up and die. And we won't be able to do as much as we do today, whether it's 12% or something less than that. And, you know, the couple of striking things over the last couple of years was London Underground could be automated today. It's 15 years before they can think about it because everybody's on the over. Now, we shouldn't need to wait for a gang of electricians who are working on overground before we can automate the underground and have 24-hour running. Singapore does it. Pretty big system.
So what are you going to do with people who are not, who I won't say made redundant, but are no longer required under that system, if you automate London Underground?
I agree with whoever sat behind you. An automated system needs different jobs. They tend to be higher level skills.
But it's not worth it unless you're reducing the number of jobs, because labour is where the cost is. You want the automation. In fact, the Victoria line has been automated for 20 to 30 years. The driver just sits there, opening and closing the door. He doesn't actually stop the train or start it up. You know, so we do have it, but we've got this job creation or non-job creation because it's politically expedient to have a full economy and to have a full employment type economy. But you know, I think we've got to get away from just keep on supplying people, which then discourages automation. And that's been the problem, the besetting problem of British industry since the war. We never automated. It was cheaper to employ cheap labour.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I do think that the demand issue is absolutely crucial. And it seems to me that one doesn't want to equate automation. Automation is the only way of solving it. It won't, because if you ask about where you're getting future innovation from, which is what, in fact, technologies before used to generate. They didn't automatically generate, they generated automation. They also generated innovation, which was actually new jobs that people before hadn't even thought of. Now what I see, I mean, two little figures, because it's not my field. One is that we have an incredibly low rate of take-up of patents in this country, relative to other things. I don't even think why that's so. Secondly, we come almost bottom in the European list of investment in the private sector. I mean, Rolls-Royce is a wonderful exception, but there are masses of non-exceptions where there's very low. So if you don't have investment, you're not going to have innovation, you're not going to have demand, and therefore you're not going to create the kind of jobs that need the kind of apprentices that you two were talking about. And that's just one side of it, I think. But the other side is the school issue. When I was listening to Lorna, I was kind of thinking about what teachers say to you now about the nature of their job. Now, schools are rather like businesses now. Their business is in getting certificates. Their business is in getting kids to take certificates and get exams so that the school goes up and gets more money and recruits more students. In a sense, they're not actually institutions about creating inquiry, innovation, learning. They're not that. They may do that on the side. Now, it seems that reminded me of a really interesting book, actually, by an American sociologist who inverted much of the kind of conventional sociology of education, which basically says that everything that's wrong about the school system is it's a reflection of the industry, of the economy. And he makes the argument that it's actually the inverse is true, that actually what we're getting is a schooled society, and the concept of a school is coming to shape the rest of society. So the kind of things that you were describing, the not good, the other lot, are actually asking for work that's remarkably like what people do in school. And the very, very few of the jobs that you described are the jobs that people might do, because in a sense, they may have got their certificate. It doesn't really matter whether they're vocational or academic, because basically the certification is exactly the same. And I think that is a non-issue, really. The certification makes them increasingly less different from each other. But unless you actually create a different purpose to the schools, you're not going to get people who are going to want to be in the jobs. And unless you get innovation, you're not going to get the jobs for them. It sounds bleak, but I mean, I think
No, very. I mean, you, to be provocative, Michael, you could argue that the problem with schools is that they're aping the worst of businesses.
No, what, sorry?
They're aping the worst of businesses, not the best of businesses. So when you said, you know, they're not spaces for, they're spaces for churning out.
But they're told
stuff.
to all the
No,
time.
hang on. But they're not places for critical inquiry and
No.
knowledge. But if you go into cutting edge workplaces like Rolls-Royce, but there are lots of others in lots of other sectors, actually they do create the kinds of learning environments that you would hope,
You might want to have
well,
in
not
school.
just schools, that maybe some universities might create as well. So I think to say they're like businesses, you have to qualify it and say they're actually, sadly,
I'm not saying all, I'm just
they're
saying.
like the worst of businesses.
I just wondered, is there a view around about what are really good? I'm asking you both actually, I saw this at the beginning of your talk. A really good apprenticeship, what sort of training that would comprise? Because what you were talking about was understanding the system. I mean, that is absolutely crucial, trying to understand how all the little pieces work. And ultimately, if you understand the system, then you write algorithms for it, and it will be automated. And I would refer you to a rather good television program last week by Marcus de Soto. I can't remember what it was called. It was about algorithms, and he showed this amazing factory. I think it was Ocado, where it was all automated. But you could not possibly do it any other way than sending off these little orders all over the place. And one way you might say this is horrific, but in other ways, what he is saying, and what I would say, is that the school system and the college system has to try and empower people to understand algorithms so they themselves can write in their little businesses or whatever. This links to design and technology. My subject's mathematics, it's very mathematical as well. But that's the sort of skill we want to know. Is that if I do it this way, then these networks, I will reduce the time. And I just think we have to rethink the whole thing, really, in a way. But it's what my question really was to you all, is what would a sort of engineering training be that isn't linked at the best, say, like Rolls-Royce, but it has some work context, but actually gives a broader training to help people understand how these bits of the system might work, wherever they might go. Because it's quite extraordinary in my area of mathematics, how you come across people who don't really recognise that, you know, if you do something here, it will affect all that down there. And then you work backwards and debug it. So I think it's that sort of skill that is so important. And I do think that schools are trying to do this in a computing curriculum, in other sorts of ways. So I don't think it's all the dead loss at all. And I think there are some sort of initiatives that one might want to support.
Right. Would you either of you two like to reply to, or both of you like to see to us about what features are good?
Features good, any apprentice to me is
Well, yeah, something that's a bit broader than just for you,
Yeah.
a broader thing.
Any apprenticeship should have the skill at whatever level, and whoever said level 2 isn't an apprenticeship, I completely agree with. So level 3, level 4, level 5, etc. The skill appropriate to that, the knowledge that underpins it, but most importantly, the workplace behaviour. So how you link what you're doing with what everybody else is doing. If you're at the top end of that, the level 7, where you're thinking about designing a system or a manufacturing process, you are thinking about the knock-ons and you need to understand the whole system. You've got to operate it as the guy I was talking about becoming a manager. He's got to be reading that and operating it and looking for the improvements so we get a constant high quality output, and then you're going to have people loading it and running their elements of it and interfering to improve that, but knowing that if they change that it's going to have another impact. So all of them need to have a whole system thinking or process thinking, but your skill, knowledge and behaviour is about the role that they are undertaking within that role, and that's it. And And I do think companies haven't done enough thinking about what people do in their jobs. So my pessimistic mood is when the baby boomers disappear, they're going to walk out with all the knowledge about how that system is, because the HR functions haven't done enough thinking about what's the skill and knowledge and behaviour that's required to do that. They haven't engaged with the engineers to think about what the future looks like.
No, okay, right. I'm going to bring 3 people in who haven't spoken. I know there's about 3 people who still want to come in. Okay, so in the order I saw was John, Richard, and then Alison. Okay, and then I'll come to 3 of you at the back. Okay, that's right hand. Oh, David. Sorry. Yeah. Right. Okay. Right, John.
Thank you, Dave. Coming from a university department, I'm sort of interested in this relationship between the degrees and the apprenticeships, and often some of the language you use seems to see that there's a fork in the road at some point before students would go to the university, and one route makes them very useful to companies and gives them. You talked about being right for the company, and others sort of turns them into these deep thinkers that you go to Cambridge for. Does that suggest we're doing something wrong then? That actually, if you say that we're obviously an engineering degree is something that's much broader and not takes people into a whole range of sectors, not just the engineering sector, but still, if our engineering graduates come to you and you have to retrain them to actually be useful in the workplace, that makes me think we're doing something wrong and our degrees are not necessarily providing. Because ideally, these shouldn't be 2 forks that diverge somewhere in the past. They should be things that run in parallel and you can cross between them. And actually, an apprentice who reaches level 7 should be as deep a thinker as those that you go and pick up from Cambridge. But the language we often use seems to suggest that isn't happening.
I wonder whether the apprenticeship brand is kind of tainted by being associated with engineering. Let me explain that. If you, under the current definition of apprenticeship, I would argue that a medical degree, a veterinary degree are virtually apprenticeships. Now, if you could call them apprenticeships, would that sort of revalue the apprenticeship offering?
No. Well, it's very interesting actually, because we had quite a lot of medics who come through the Institute over the years, even before we merged with UCL. And actually, they are quite comfortable at referring to their training as an apprenticeship. It's part of the lexicon that they use to describe what that would happen. So in a sense, it's not a step change. Okay, I think the pharmacists and the vets as well, they do see it in those kinds of terms.
Can I?
Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, that's very interesting, because again, I think one of the things Alison and I have tried to do is to say, if you think of apprenticeship as a model of learning, then it's a model of learning that, and I guess, everybody in this room went through some kind of apprenticeship. Some of us might still be going through it to become an expert in whatever it is that people do. So if you try and see it as a model of learning, then I think that does open up a lot of potential. The problem is, because it's also an instrument of the state education and training system, and you would find that even more so in some other countries, I think that precludes us from, it means we forget that ultimately it's a model of learning, and it does the things that Celia was, I think, asking for. One of the big issues here is we have also decoupled it, and that's why I was depressed when I looked at the engineering vacancies, because one of the things you want to hold on to with engineering is that it still has that occupational underpinning. Once you decouple apprenticeship from, even if the apprentice doesn't become in the end what the name was on the tin, they will have acquired the skills and knowledge and, as Graham says, the behaviours to enter that broad occupational field. And the more we decouple it from that, then I think we're in trouble. Yeah.
Alison?
So, follows on quite well actually from what Lorna was saying. If it's an occupational field that we're talking about here, then it goes beyond the job and a single employer and a single individual or whatever. So in order to kind of think about levers for creating a more healthy balance between supply and demand, I think there needs to have some radical thought about the kind of institutional underpinnings, and the kind of potentially collective approaches to skill formation that we might think about wanting to develop. Now that's not easy culturally or historically, but we have got models in other countries, without saying that they're always wonderful. But we do know how the kind of levers and ecosystem of institutional arrangements can support a collective approach which mitigates the risk for individual employers and individuals, and which has the opportunity to create occupational expertise, which is a kind of capacity at a national level, hopefully, which all the kind of people who are passionate about this seems to want to encourage. So it's perhaps trying to take the conversation out of the direct relationship between an apprentice and an employer and a job, and thinking about what we need to try and achieve in order to direct ourselves to something which is going to have payoffs at a broader level and not just for individuals. That of course requires systems of incentives and so on and so forth. So quite radical on kind of financial instruments as well as the kind of capacity issues.
It's quite interesting. I'm David Swinsko. I'm the director of the Centre for Applied Sciences at City Islington College, the Key College. And I've just come out of a tour that I've given to some civil servants from DFE and TEC who come to look at what we do, and are particularly interested in apprentices. And I'm also under a lot of pressure to provide a lot more apprentices, because I don't have many. But I was bemused by this because we went into a room with my veterinary nursing apprentices and my veterinary nurses. Some of them are on apprenticeship schemes because that means they're being funded apprentices, and some of them are sent day release to me to do some technical stuff and also to practice their skills and things, and then they go back to their practices and they've got somebody who we support in their training back at their practice. But the employer pays for all of that, so that doesn't count as an apprenticeship. Although actually they do the same thing when they're with me and when they're back at work, and they get the same certificate, but the funding's different. And I also train opticians, and they come day release, and they go back and they practice things in their workplaces. But they don't class apprentices either, because their employer pays for them, and the status isn't involved. Lab technicians are. I've got real problems delivering lab technician apprentices. And I'm trying to deliver engineering apprentices, and the problem is that I can't get a large enough group of apprentices together without taking a large risk on money in the first place. Now I'm doing that because I can cross-subsidise and I believe in it, but this is quite a difficult thing to do. And one of the stories I'm getting is that for small employers there are two things going on. One is they can use graduates. They might not be appropriate, but they'll probably get them to do whatever this skill is at level 4, level 5, that they need them to do. And the other is, their concern is if they train them very well, they'll spend a lot of money doing that and they'll go down the road and get more money, because they'll go to an employer who isn't spending that money training them. And so I think there's a problem. We know where we want to be, but how do we get from here to there with a system which has developed a way of dealing with the shortages on an individual company way of doing it.
There's three people at the back of the room who've been waiting some time coming, been very patient, so over to you, Ken. Neil first maybe, and then round the group afterwards.
I just wanted to pick up on that point and first of all just say something positive. We've enrolled our 1,000th advanced apprentice this week, so you know, there's evidence that the system works with some very committed employers, both large and small. A couple of points I wanted to make. One was about the problem of pathways, and a very well-defined pathway within education. You do your GCSEs, if you're academic, you do your A-levels, if you're still academic, you go to university. And a very clear ladder of progression that till now has not existed on the work-based route and the apprenticeship route. It's quite difficult to navigate your way through the levels. And actually, quite a lot stops at level 2, and then a lot more stops at level 3, and very little gets to level 4, level 5. And actually, if you talk to major employers, they will tell you that the structural gap in skills is actually at level 4. It's technician, it's advanced engineers, and because I like statistics, I'll give you another one, which is that of the 4.1 million people in further education colleges, the number doing a level 4 programme is in engineering is 36,000. 36,000 of 4.1 million. And we are predicting that we need 80,000 trained engineers by 2017 just to meet the current supply. So there's that space used to be filled by the polytechnics. They've gone. Our further education colleges used to be crammed full of people doing HNCs and HNDs at open evening. That's largely gone, and that's where the structural gap is.
You'd like to come back in on it?
My points.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Booth. My early career was in the electrical power industry. It led me into Aston University, where I was at the power engineering group, and now working with Staffs University as well. I think all these schemes are really just skills development programs to ensure that people come out as fit to practice engineers at whatever level. And the programs are putting the tools in place to do just that. And I think we're missing one very important word, that these people are going to come out as competent engineers, which leads me back into UK Spec and the Engineering Council. The Engineering Council's triangle is upside down. We've got far more chartered engineers than we have incorporated engineers. We've got hardly any engineering technicians. So to me, apprenticeships, when they work properly, would be a godsend, because all those apprentices should come out as aspirant engineering technicians, and if it works right, their companies should be encouraging them to register as engineering technicians. But at the base of all this, I think there's a fundamental triangle that's in operation. The student, their company, and the learning establishment are all engaged in developing that person's competence as they go forward. And another thing, I think that there's an arrogance around the HE sector and the FE sector that we don't recognise the value of what that person may be learning in the workplace and maybe give it some academic credit. So there's an awful lot that we can do moving forward, I think.
I just wanted to give a view on why there's a rather straightforward progression from GCSEs to A-levels to higher education, so-called, and it wasn't so evident in vocational. It's just a personal view that a young person with ambition can drive themselves through GCSEs, ASs, A2s, through the UCAS system, through university and out into the employment market. Whereas if they're going to take an apprenticeship route or a vocational route, they also need an employer with the ambition to create the job that has the right occupational flavour to give them access to the right mix of competence and other things. And if I wished for one thing in the skills system, is a few more employers with a bit more ambition. Because the simplest thing to do is to say, well, we've always made things, and we know where to find the people to make the things, and we should carry on making the things until nobody wants the things anymore. Whereas, if you really are ambitious, you'll say, well, actually, what is it that we'd like to change into? And what are the skills and sorts of people that we might like to have and make us change into that thing? And do you know what would happen? You'd find 17, 18, 19-year-olds with a bit of nous who wanted to get involved in that company and exchange from the beginning. We call them apprentices or opticians or something. And they would come and they would get this really rich experience that you've talked about and you've talked about and you've talked about. But the underpinning thing is ambition. So somebody said, so why is the UK so unproductive? This is, I'm summarising. One of the reasons is that we just lack ambition.
No one's really talked about things apart from colleges. From memory, I think most engineering apprenticeships aren't delivered by colleges, they're delivered by independent training providers. I'd quite like to know why independent training providers have managed to drive up the numbers so high in retail, customer service and places like that. They've not managed to do the same thing in engineering. Because it's actually an economics argument, I think, rather than...
Did you want to respond to that? Which is fine.
Yeah, that's something Matthew said.
So the person behind you coming back to Daniel, and then you bring in that. What's the matter? Yeah, sorry.
I suspect there's people in the room better qualified to answer this than me, but my best guess is the economics. So we're also a sponsor of the UTC, and when you get the same funding to run an engineering school as you do a hairdressing salon, and it's buying a lathe is a bit more expensive than a comb, but the DFE don't recognise that, and I think that filters right the way through the system. So if you're doing technology, you're disadvantaged by the funding mechanisms, and employers' expectations are not around paying premium prices in smaller organisations. So I think it's down to economics. But I must say that I know there are people in the room who are better qualified, so I could be wrong. But I think that's what's driving ludicrous numbers of trainees for other sectors where there's definitely no jobs. And it's not happening where, and I make this point earlier about the demand. Sometimes I do wake up and think, my God, are we really a million engineers short? Because I passionately believe about training more engineers. I go into businesses all the time who talk about the problem getting engineers, and then you say there's 38 jobs. And I go up to the Midlands and I come away thinking, there's 1,000 apprentices there that I've been on a couple of days, I've been on a visit today. Where's the other 999,000 that we need in 3 years' time? Slightly contradicting the point I made earlier on demand, but sometimes I do get a cold sweat. So I'm not, and I'm looking at Matthew because he extrapolated some very interesting numbers on that. So I'm not saying they're not right, but it's an interesting question. And maybe the point that's being made is the demand's just not there.
Or the alternative is that employers have found other ways of satisfying the demand.
Yeah.
So in my company, we can recruit fantastic engineers from Southern Europe because the economy in Southern Europe is not in a very good state. Now, when the economy in Southern Europe recovers, we'll say goodbye to them, and then we'll be in trouble. So we as engineers have found creative solutions to our problem, which are not just about the skill system. So we found other ways to report it.
Can I just come? So actually the point I was in a way trying to make very inelegantly was, I think part of the problem is the system that we have for FE is around democratisation of FE. And it means that training providers, where they can take money out, that's what's driving the system. They're not making much money out of engineering, so don't be surprised that engineering isn't taking out.
Right. About the question about the pathways which are not as clearly structured in vocational within the academic. And I think we get back to families in the older period of apprenticeships played a very, very important role in fact, enabling people to get into the beginning of apprenticeships. Partly because, in fact, the jobs were more fixed in particular localities, and partly because there was a kind of inheritance connection in tailoring, craft, various kinds of things. And that's completely gone. Families don't have that unless we actually think about how we can actually overcome that. That will continue to be a problem.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Andrew. I'm interested in engineering education, have been for a while. The point I wanted to come back on is a similar thing to do with what Matthew said, this idea of it's not clear. I mean, I remember 20 years ago trying to decide which pathway to take, and I ended up being one of those deep thinkers at Cambridge doing engineering rather than someone, and actually really suffering as a consequence because I really wanted to use my hands. But if you've got 3 million apprentices, it's almost like you need 3 million masters. So trying to find, for a young person to find the right kind of person, it did depend on family connections in the past. So I'm kind of interested in this question of the reductionism that seems to be going on around a target and therefore minimising the roles that are available to students. You know, you don't get quality when you get quantity. But then the potential apprentices have this incredible complexity that they have to navigate to try and line up a job and a decent qualification. One area, my point is in this, building on Lee's point about the demand and, you know, this question of a future where there's potentially less work. And I went to a similar event about the rise of the robots thing. Suddenly, a lot of my own consultancy work will all be done by artificial intelligence very, very soon. Most of the people that I know who are involved in manufacturing and making are self-employed inventors, freelance inventors. And most of them, I know, I think would love to take on some apprentices. These are the masters, these are the potential 3 million masters. There is a massive maker movement taking off, but again, it's a very complex, one person at a time, one-man band sort of grouping. And I wonder whether there's opportunities there.
I'm conscious of the time, and I promised Lorna and Graham they could have one kind of takeaway message, okay? But I also was given a challenge by Lorna when she, at the end of her presentation, what's the CE going to do? So I'm going to reserve what's the CE going to do, which I haven't been able to consult Paul on. Off the cuffs. How best policy is made in England, obviously. Okay. And but Lorna and Graham will take away message, and then some responses, some thoughts on what the CE might do next, because we don't want it just to fade away. I think we had a really fascinating conversation. So.
Can I say something before?
Oh, yes.
Try to think about
absolutely.
takeaway.
Yes. Say something, and then Graham can have a takeaway.
No, I think that there's a number of important points made, which were kind of culminating at the end there towards the fact that young people need support. And it sort of links back, I think, to some early points that were made about what, as sociologists call, horizons for action young people are presented with in school. And then Neil's point about pathways, that the easy pathway is to stay in education. Because if you stay on that pathway, then you will get the support, because your school will support you, your teachers will support you. The careers education systems collapse, but if they're there, they'll probably know how to support you, and so on through the system. And Michael's right, in previous times, and certainly with apprentices I was talking about in Manchester, yes, would have had, and certainly the boys would have had fathers and uncles and cousins to ease them into positions. But you had a family, you had family resources, so that you could get to work. You had the money to get to work and buy your lunch and so on. What we've stripped away is that support for young people in the work-based, vocational, however you want to call it. Plus, and it linked back again, I think, to Neil Bates's point about levels, is what we've also stripped out are the rungs in the ladder to enable you to go through that work-based route, knowing that if you've done a level 2, it will give you the platform to go on to a level 3, to go on to a level 4. The problem we've got is you can do a level 2 and that is the end. You've got to go back down the snake to go back up the ladder again. You know, it's not, for the work-based route people, there are a lot of obstacles in the path, in your pathway, unless you get into, you know, the world-class apprenticeships that Graham ran, and then you're as good as in the education route, because what the qualifications you're getting, the education and training you're getting will provide you with that support. And we used to have work-based routes. I did one. I trained as a journalist through a work-based route straight from school. We used to do it for chartered surveyors, accountants, lawyers, etc., etc. And that was an apprenticeship. We just happened to have lifted it up into a different domain.
Take my message.
Sorry. Oh, I didn't do my takeaway.
No, let Graham go. You remember the thing.
Can I give my takeaway?
Oh, absolutely. Ready now.
Right. I think we have to improve workplaces. I think it goes back to Matthew's point about business ambition. But to get that business ambition, a lot of our employers need support, because a lot of them struggle with this because they themselves have not been through it. They don't know how to model good workforce development because they themselves haven't seen it or experienced it. And by treating employers as a homogenous lump, which is what policymakers do, that's a big problem, because you end up with the struggling businesses in the same homogenous lump as Rolls-Royce.
Right. I'll start with an apology for my comments about deep thinkers from Cambridge. I didn't mean
UCL
or anywhere else. I didn't mean to imply that we retrained them. What we did was add to the great knowledge they gained with workplace behaviour and skill. And that was the addition. It wasn't a retraining issue. Oh, in some cases it was. In some cases it was. For finishing one of my more optimistic moods, for 400 apprenticeships we had 30,000 applicants. There are a great, in spite of the education system and all the messaging, there's a great number of young people who really, really want to get into interesting, challenging work. And they see apprenticeships, and not just with Rolls-Royce, many of the larger companies who still do, and see that as a good route. I agree with you on the movement of the makers. The great thing about building a school, a UTC, I've had 5 years doing this, I've got 100 to 150 of those smallish companies who are desperately wanting to engage with us because they want access to these bright young people who can join them and grow their business. I've got one guy who's doing carbon fibre, lightweight carbon fibre manufacturing, and all he can see with his order book is that going forward. Really, really keen to come and do masterclasses, really keen to get these young people. So, in a really optimistic day, I see my 120, 150 companies. And I think about we're going to have to double the size of the UTC in the next few years for that. So I think my takeaway is it can work, but there is something about this skills system, and I think Matthew's right about we need more optimism within businesses like those small companies who are really up for this.
Right, I'm going to have 3 quick concluding thoughts. The first one is that for a lot of the conversation, but then it changed, there was quite a criticism of the skills system. And I'm not saying people then completely let go of their criticism of the skills system, but they started to identify how to improve the skills system, how to tackle the issues. So I think one of my takeaway messages for the CEE would be, talk to the colleagues who are in the room, we need to kind of come back, I think, with a short digest of creative thoughts that come from the conversation about starting points for tackling issues in the skills system, whether they be on the school side, the kind of issue that Celia raised about algorithms, through to issues to do with better designing vocational work in colleges and providers. So I think there's an issue there. I think there's an issue with employers, which actually we've kind of come to at the end, which is partially about, and it's two-sided, because I do think you're making more dystopian comments about the, what I called earlier, the rise of the robot. There is something in there that does need to be taken into account of. I just don't particularly want to go down the fatalistic route of saying this early on, is education for leisure. But I do recognise that the anecdote is the question I put to Martin Ford, who was giving the rise of the robot presentation at the IPPR, was, but what about the new industries that we needed? Because Jeremy Rifkin's book, which has the same kind of argument, he says it's the ecological side, this is where the new industry, where the new work will be. So I think there are kind of other visions, but sticking with the, off the kind of the stargazing, but actually kind of a bit more grounded around the employers. I think we've had some really interesting examples of how employers are tackling issues, and I do think making visible the kind of practice that Matthew described as what I call the workarounds, how employers are finding solutions to engineering issues and playing that back to government is important. But I also think the SME issue is important, and the micro businesses, because I've seen that not just in engineering, but actually in the digital sector. So, anecdote, I went to Tech City with some work a couple of years ago, and I was walking around Old Street, basically, and one of the companies I went into was an accountancy company. They had apprentices, but they had apprentices like I'd never seen before, because they were using cloud computing to actually do their work, which means that the companies they were contracting with could look at the work that the technicians were doing, the apprentices were doing, almost 5 minutes after they'd actually done it. And they were working globally. But in relation to something that was being said, you would not know if you were part of the indigenous population of Old Street, what the hell was going on. So the apprentice can't then, unless there's a way of bringing it alive. And that's really, I think, the big issue for the CEE, because we can do some other things in the meantime. But the intention is to have a site at Stratford. And I've been plugging this, so anybody with grace to an employer in the room, I'm looking at you. But I'm looking away. Okay. I think that issue I heard earlier on about there's generations of parents and children who do not know what engineering does is really, really important. And I think we've just got, when David was giving all those fantastic examples from City in Islington, I saw people around the room nodding, thinking, oh yes, that's really interesting, but I bet they hadn't even thought about those areas as part of either applied science or engineering. So I think that CE has to try to get as quickly as possible on that site at Stratford, so that the communities can use it, not just the local community, but more broadly. Exemplars of how engineers provide solutions to the current problems that we're facing. That's what motivates and excites young kids. I say this as a teacher from years ago. Come and find out something new. Okay, so it's not a museum where you look at the past. It's actually, this is what's happening now, solutions to current problems. And I really think that would be a great way of trying to kind of deal with some of the cultural issues that people spoke to. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you all very much for coming. Thank you all very much for all those fantastic questions.